Listen closely, because I'm about to tell you something that your brain already knows, but your life has forgotten. The most powerful transformative habit you can ever develop has nothing to do with productivity hacks, time blocking, green smoothies, or 10-step morning routines. It's this: conscious repetition, repetition of thought, repetition of emotion. Repetition is not boring. It's not trivial. It's not basic. Repetition is how the brain learns. Repetition is how the brain remembers. And repetition, conscious repetition, is how the brain becomes. If you want to rewire your life, you must first rewire your brain. And the only way your brain rewires is through repeated, emotionally significant input. You think you can read one quote and become a different person? Watch one video and be transformed? Listen to one podcast and suddenly be free? That's not how your neurobiology works. Because you're not fighting laziness. You're not battling bad habits. You're battling a brain that has been programmed by trauma, by society, by repetition. Let that sink in. You are the product of what you have repeatedly thought, believed, and felt. And the only way out is to repeat something new until it becomes stronger than what was old. Do you understand what this means? It means motivation is fleeting. It means inspiration is temporary, but neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, is permanent if you know how to use it. You can literally change the structure of your brain. You can strengthen new neural pathways. You can deactivate old patterns of self-sabotage. But only if you do one thing: repeat what you want to become. Over and over and over. Repetition is the language of the subconscious. It is the language of change. It is the language of evolution. Your brain doesn't speak goals. It doesn't understand wishful thinking. It doesn't respond to your new journal or your vision board unless you repeat it enough times that it begins to burn into your neural map. You've got to install your future. You've got to program it. You've got to practice it until your brain doesn't know the difference between who you are now and who you are becoming. Every time you think a thought, you are deepening a neural groove. Every time you feel an emotion, you are reinforcing a pathway. Every time you speak about your life, you are sculpting your future. So what are you repeating? Because if you're repeating, "I'm tired, I'm stuck, nothing works, it's too late," you are wiring your brain for fatigue, for paralysis, for failure, for regret. And that's not your fault. That's your conditioning. But now that you know this, you have a choice. You can interrupt the old signal and repeat the one that will change your life. Here's the truth. Your brain is not loyal to who you are. It's loyal to what you repeat. If you keep replaying fear, your brain will become exceptional at detecting threat. If you keep practicing self-doubt, your brain will become a master of hesitation. If you keep imagining failure, your brain will sabotage success. But if you repeat vision, it will become your future. If you repeat discipline, it will become your identity. If you repeat possibility, your brain will stop looking for limits and start scanning for opportunity. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are just running a pattern. And that pattern is not stronger than your neuroplasticity. Not even close. But to change it, you've got to do what the brain demands. Repetition with emotion, repetition with vision, repetition with belief. You want confidence, then repeat the behavior of a confident person. You want peace, then repeat the response of a calm person. You want success, then repeat the focus of a successful person until it no longer feels like effort. Because the brain adapts, it always adapts. And the more you repeat something, the less resistance you feel, the more natural it becomes, the more your biology aligns with your intention. People keep asking, what's the secret? The secret is that there is no secret. There is only wiring. The only difference between the life you want and the life you have is the signal your brain receives the most. That's it. So make no mistake, when you speak, you're wiring. When you scroll, you're wiring. When you ruminate, you're wiring. When you replay what hurt you, who betrayed you, what you lost, you are repeating pain. And your brain, it obeys, it wires it in, it makes it your default. But here's the most powerful thing you will ever hear about your brain. It doesn't care what's true. It only cares what's repeated. They repeat what you want to be true, not once, not twice, not just when you feel like it, not just when the moon is right and the crystals are charged and your calendar is clear, every single day. This is not about mantras. This is not about positive thinking. This is about repetition as a neurological weapon. You have the ability to change your automatic thoughts. You have the ability to override your emotional reflexes. You have the ability to rebuild your brain, but not through willpower, through wiring. And wiring demands repetition. So let me ask you, what will you choose to repeat? Because that is what your life will become. Not what you dream, not what you hope, not what you post or promise, only what you repeat. And when you choose to repeat power, when you choose to repeat purpose, when you choose to repeat vision, clarity, courage, action, over and over and over, until your brain doesn't flinch, doesn't doubt, doesn't resist, then everything changes. Everything. You think you are who you are because of your personality, because of your childhood, because of your genes, your circumstances, your past. But that's not the full truth. That's not what the brain says. The brain says something far more powerful, far more dangerous, and far more liberating. You are what you repeat. That's it. That's the code. You are not your potential. You are not your intention. You are not what you hope to be. You are what you've trained your brain to expect. And what you've trained it to expect over time becomes what you call your life. Every time you think a thought, feel an emotion, or take an action, your brain fires a pattern. And with every repetition, that pattern gets stronger. That is how habits are formed. That is how beliefs are wired. That is how identities are built. You repeat powerlessness, your brain strengthens the circuits of helplessness. You repeat hesitation, your brain builds the framework for fear. You repeat survival, you hardwire scarcity. And the more often you practice those patterns, the more automatic they become. Eventually, you no longer think, you just react. You no longer choose, you default. You no longer live, you loop. Because repetition creates automaticity, and automaticity becomes personality. And personality, when it's not examined, when it's not rewired, becomes your prison. So the habit that will transform your life, it's not a hack, it's not a mantra, it's not a one-off epiphany. It is the disciplined, daily, deliberate repetition of the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that reflect your next level, not who you've been, not who you're afraid to be, but who you're becoming. This is where neuroplasticity meets destiny. You don't need more information. You don't need another motivational quote. What you need is to pick a new pattern and run it into your brain so many times that the old pattern cannot survive. Because your brain has one rule: use it or lose it. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Neurons that stop firing, get pruned. You've been reinforcing who you don't want to be. You've been watering weeds. You've been feeding fear with every worried thought, every unconscious choice, every what if that ends in defeat. And your brain, it's been listening, learning, adapting, because that's what it's built to do. It doesn't care what's right. It doesn't care what's real. It only cares what's repeated. If you tell yourself you're not enough, your brain memorizes it. If you act like a victim, your brain rewards it with chemical safety. If you show up in the world playing small, your brain celebrates the lack of risk. But when you interrupt the cycle, when you stop reinforcing the old identity, when you install a new loop and run it again and again and again, that's when the brain starts to change. And when the brain changes, everything changes. You don't have to fight your brain. You have to train it. And training takes time. It takes repetition. It takes doing the same thing over and over until it becomes your new normal. Until you don't have to think about being disciplined, you just are. Until you don't have to force confidence, you just feel it. Until courage doesn't feel like a risk, it feels like home. But this only happens through repetition. You've already mastered it. You've repeated your current life thousands of times. Your beliefs, your doubts, your self-sabotage, your procrastination, your cravings, they're not flaws. They're not failures. They're rehearsed behaviors. And if you rehearsed your limitations into existence, you can rehearse your freedom just the same. The question is not, can I change? The question is, what will I practice? The question is, what will I practice? What will I repeat with such intensity and such consistency that my brain begins to believe it, expect it, and ultimately become it? That's the question that rewires you from the inside out. Because change doesn't come from what you do once. It comes from what you do until it becomes automatic. And then from that new place of automation, you create a new life, not by force, but by identity. The most dangerous belief you can have is this is just who I am. No, it's not. This is just who you've repeated being. This is just what your brain has practiced enough to run on autopilot. And when you understand that, you take the power back. Because now, every repetition becomes a vote. Every repetition becomes a construction. Every repetition becomes a reclamation. If you want to live differently, you must think differently. Not once, not twice, but every single day until that new way of thinking is the path of least resistance. Until it feels weird not to be empowered. Until it feels strange not to believe in yourself. Until your default setting is no longer maybe, but absolutely. Repetition changes the chemical signature of your brain. It changes your hormone profile. It changes your nervous system. Because the more you repeat something, the more efficient it becomes. And what becomes efficient becomes effortless. That's the game. That's how you break through. That's how you stop using willpower and start living in alignment. You've repeated survival for so long that you forgot your brain was born for evolution. You were not meant to loop in your limitations. You were not meant to marinate in old memories. You were not meant to memorize your pain. You were meant to train your potential. But potential doesn't activate itself. It must be installed. And installation comes from repeated signals that say, this is who I am now, this is who I am now, this is who I am now. Not in words, in repetition. Repetition is the brain's proof. This is why the most dangerous moment in transformation is not the beginning, it's the drift that comes after. When the old patterns start whispering again, when the ego wants comfort, when the body wants familiarity. And what will save you in that moment is not inspiration, it's rehearsal. You will repeat who you are becoming until your biology gives up the fight and finally adapts. That's the law. This is how people break cycles. This is how generational trauma ends. This is how old blueprints are erased. Not through insight, through repetition. You don't heal because you understand the wound. You heal because you stop reinforcing the pattern that reopens it every day. You don't succeed because you want success. You succeed because you repeat the behaviors of someone who is already there. Long enough, loud enough, powerfully enough that your brain no longer remembers how to not be that version of you. If you don't like your life, look at what you're repeating. What are your emotional reflexes? What beliefs do you feed with your focus? Because repetition is the only thing that ever builds anything real. And that applies to greatness just as much as it applies to fear. This isn't glamorous. This isn't flashy, but this is what works, and it always has. You become what you fire, you sustain what you wire, and you transform what you repeat. So choose the pattern, choose it and run it, and don't stop. Not when you're tired, not when you're discouraged, not when you can't see results, not when your old identity throws a tantrum and demands you hold the new signal. Because the brain doesn't need intensity, it needs consistency, it needs frequency, it needs reinforcement. Do you hear me? This is not a mindset shift, this is a neural shift. You don't need to try harder, you need to repeat smarter. This is your power, this is your freedom, this is the habit that will transform your life. Repeat who you want to become until there is no version of you left that remembers how to be anything else. You've heard it said, repetition is the mother of mastery. But I'll tell you this, repetition without emotion is just noise. It's a dull whisper into a brain that only listens when it feels something. The truth is, your brain isn't just a machine that catalogues your words. It's a living, breathing, emotional translator. It encodes what you feel, not what you say. And that distinction is everything. You can say, I'm successful, I'm confident, I'm abundant, every day of your life. But if underneath those words you feel doubt, anxiety, or indifference, your brain isn't recording the words, it's recording the signal. And the signal is fear. The signal is disbelief. The signal is resistance. So when you wonder why you keep slipping back into your old self, when you wonder why your affirmations aren't shifting your reality, it's not because you're broken, it's because you're saying the right things with the wrong frequency. Emotion is the amplifier. Emotion is the voltage. Without it, repetition becomes empty routine. With it, repetition becomes neuro reprogramming. This is how it works. Every time you pair repetition with strong emotion, you activate the amygdala. And once that happens, the brain marks the event as important. It flags the data, it prioritizes the pattern. That's why you remember every heartbreak in vivid detail. But forget half the lectures you've heard. Emotion imprints. It doesn't just inform, it engraves. So if you want to transform your life, you don't just repeat. You charge your repetition with electricity. You speak your goals with full body conviction. You visualize your future with tears in your eyes and fire in your gut. You act like it's already real. You feel the feelings of your future self before it arrives. Because the brain doesn't know the difference between what's imagined and what's lived. It only knows what's repeated and what's felt. You want your brain to rewire for courage? You've got to feel what courage feels like and feed it to your brain like a memory. You want to become someone who walks in power, then show your brain what power looks like, sounds like, feels like, on repeat, not once, not twice, but relentlessly. Because when you do this, something extraordinary happens. You start to create a feedback loop. Your thoughts trigger emotions, your emotions reinforce belief, your belief fuels behavior, and your behavior confirms the thoughts. Now, you're not forcing change, you're living in alignment. This is not self-help. This is neuroscience. Your identity doesn't shift when you understand something intellectually. It shifts when your nervous system begins to expect it. And it expects it when it has experienced it through repeated emotional rehearsal. It is not enough to write your affirmations in a notebook. It is not enough to meditate in silence while feeling nothing. It is not enough to whisper your goals and hope they land. You have to own the vibration of the life you're calling in. You have to declare it with energy. You have to speak it from your cells. You have to become so emotionally involved with your vision that your brain has no choice but to install it as your new normal. So, if you've been doing the work and nothing is shifting, ask yourself, am I emotionally asleep when I practice? Am I just going through the motions? Or am I lighting a fire every time I speak, visualize, or move toward my future? You don't need louder affirmations. You need deeper resonance. You don't need longer routines. You need more powerful signals. Because repetition alone is memory, but emotional repetition, that's identity. And here's the key. It doesn't matter where you start. It doesn't matter how far off track you've gone. The moment you commit to emotionally charged repetition, the moment you bring your full self to the practice, you begin to shift the frequency of your brain. And when your brain changes, your choices change. When your choices change, your results change. And when your results change, your life inevitably follows. That is the power you hold in this very moment. So don't let your repetition be routine. Don't let it be numb. Don't let it be lifeless. Let it be thunderous. Let it shake your nervous system. Let it demand change from every cell in your body. Say it like your life depends on it, because in some way it does. You are not just saying affirmations. You are issuing neural commands to your future self. You are laying the emotional blueprint for your next level. You are showing your brain what's possible and telling it, this is where we live now. And when you do that enough times with enough feeling, your brain surrenders. It stops fighting. It adapts, it installs the new wiring, and that's when it happens. You don't just believe it, you become it. So the next time you speak your dream, don't whisper, don't doubt, don't mumble your way through a future you were born to claim. Stand up, breathe deep, speak with thunder. Visualize with intensity. Feel it so strongly that your body doesn't know whether it's memory or manifestation. Because the brain doesn't care if it's real, it only cares if it's repeated with emotion. This is the signal of transformation. This is the habit that rewires everything. And this is how you change your life, not by information alone, but by emotional repetition that turns vision into identity and identity into inevitable reality. And if you need a reminder, if you ever lose that charge, come back here. NeuroPower Talks is where we don't just speak change, we build it. One pattern, one neuron, one emotional command at a time. So go. Feel it fully, repeat it relentlessly, live it boldly, and do not stop until your nervous system no longer remembers how to be anything less.